Wisemind Publications. Selected Utterances of His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I. Volume. Copyright Wisemind Publications 2009. Ras Rabin I Ras Flaco Taferi. Speech to African Leaders. The convening of the Conference of Independent African States in Ghana, where responsible statesmen representing a free government are gathering to consider common problems, is a great and momentous event. As an integral part of the African continent, Ethiopia looks back with pride to the role which she has played in the history of the development of Africa, and looks forward with confidence to the future of this great continent. In her long and glorious history, Ethiopia has time and again had to struggle against overwhelming odds to preserve intact her traditional freedom and independence and to guarantee from generation to generation the right of free men to work out their own destiny without interference or hindrance. The world is only now coming to realize what Ethiopia and Africa have long recognized, that peace, independence and the prosperity of mankind can be achieved and assured only by the collective and united efforts of free men who are prepared to maintain eternal vigilance and labor unceasingly to protect these most precious of God's gifts. The sympathy and support which Ethiopia received from other African peoples when she was invaded 23 years ago is ample testimony of the strong sentiments which unite all free African countries. In our own lifetime the world has undergone changes more sweeping and striking than those seen during any similar period in history. Technical and scientific advances have combined to raise mankind to a level of material achievement never before realized. It is the duty and responsibility of the independent African states to further this development and to bring the benefits of modern civilization to increasingly large numbers of people in Africa. However, as man's capacity to improve his own lot has grown, so has his power to spread havoc and destruction correspondingly increased. The independent African states must assure that the growing weight of Africa is enlisted on the side of peace and justice to the end of avoiding a third Holocaust which could well engulf the entire world and result in the total destruction of mankind. But dwarfing even man's material achievements in the 20th century has been the emergence of peoples all over the world into freedom and independence. Today, for the first time, men everywhere to whom freedom and independence were, but a short time ago, only words, and for whom economic and political self-determination were no more than far distant goals, have achieved the status of free men and are directing their efforts and energies to their own advancement. We are particularly gratified and proud that this development has been so marked and widespread on the great continent of Africa. Africa will no longer be the unknown continent, for its human and material resources are beyond measure, and this great continent now stands on the verge of an economic, political, and cultural development which, when realized, will be without parallel in history. In this development, Ethiopia will have its own particular, and we feel, important role to play. It is for this reason that we have charged our beloved son Prince Haile Selassie with the high mission to be our personal representative and the head of the Ethiopian delegation to the Conference of Independent African States. Ethiopia knows how hard-won is independence and how vital it is that men be jealous of their freedom and be ever prepared to defend it. Ethiopia knows, as her history has taught her, that the world is small, and that cooperation among all nations of the world, East and West alike, is not only possible and desirable, but indispensable for the welfare of mankind. Ethiopia knows that the willingness of the independent states of Africa to cooperate and work together in solving their common problems and achieving their common goals is essential to the continued progress of the African peoples. It is a propitious omen for the future that at this very moment the free nations of Africa are giving tangible evidence of their determination to work together not only for their own good but for the good of Africa and the entire world. The task is great. It demands wise judgment and statesmanship of the highest order. It requires unceasing labor, a dedication to fundamental principles and objectives and a determination to overcome all obstacles, however large. He who suffers conquers, and in the final resort, wins the crown of victory. We pray that Almighty God will bless the conference with strength and wisdom and crown its efforts with success. Him Emperor Haile Selassie I. His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I speaks on education. The education of woman. With regards to the boys, we are satisfied with the progress made. Our hope in this circumstance is partially fulfilled, but the prospect of our female children is frightening. It is as if they die early and leave their parents childless, for as soon as they show some promise in their education, they are, either by their parents or of their own accord, married. The money we spend on the girls' school seems to be wasted because they leave before receiving enough knowledge. If this state of affairs continues, how can we reach the goal of public education for which we have planned and are planning? Today, the women of the world are not content only to live as housewives. In most countries they are striving harder and harder for higher education so that they may participate in the civic duties of their community and nation. In time of war, women like men, have served their country and in some of them have fought side by side with the men against the enemy. From speech at the opening of a school at Nazareth. University graduation. It gives us great pleasure to congratulate all the students, who through their earnest efforts have overcome the various obstacles in their way and have achieved success in their studies. Man desires many things, but it is the individual's duty and responsibility to desire the proper things. Anyone who makes the wrong choices will be a burden, not only to himself but to future generations. As we have mentioned over and over again, the test of what you students have obtained through your education will be what you are able to accomplish in the future. Great responsibilities await you. You must show the real worth of your education by the way in which you shoulder these responsibilities. We are confident that you will bring a blessing to your country, your families, to all those who have planned and labored for you, and to yourselves. This university came into being as a result of the dreams of many years. It is indeed gratifying to note that a larger number are graduating this year than in previous years. This fact gives us confidence that the many positions which have been waiting to be filled by well-qualified men and women will increasingly be filled. This encourages us and strengthens our confidence that we shall reach the goals that we have set for our country. Since education is one of the basic needs of any country, we have to provide opportunities for education throughout our empire. Our many plans for development call for skilled and well-trained personnel, men who should come from our various institutions of higher learning, individuals who will be the pride of the country. It is they who will perform a real service for their country, for any plan which does not have the proper personnel to execute it will remain a mere plan on paper. We need well-qualified people who are proud of being Ethiopians, people who are proud of being Africans, people who are prepared to execute the plans that have already been envisioned. These are the caliber of men who should be produced in our university. The person who, even while at school, realizes the needs of his country and has proper sense of values and urgency will see what is needed, and will be able to fill it. He need not be separated from his country and its culture before being prepared to handle a position of responsibility. It was because we realized that a national university would help in this training process that we gladly turned over the site and buildings which we inherited from our father for the establishment of this university. In order that this university might maintain standards equal to those of other universities, the members of the faculty should possess qualifications equal to those faculties elsewhere. And the students themselves should be equal to students of other universities. They should all be inspired by devotion to their country and loyalty to their leaders. Steadfastness and perseverance are invaluable in attaining these goals. We will know that this university has reached its maturity when we can see a sufficient number of qualified men and women being produced, and an increasing number of students coming forward eagerly to take advantage of the opportunities it affords. It is through this university and other similar institutions of higher learning that we can best preserve the culture of our country and interpret our esteemed heritage to the world at large. We should understand, therefore, that this university must be a place not only to prepare men and women for their various vocations, but also to help them gain a better knowledge of their culture and a desire to disseminate it. The growth of this university and the establishment and development of other comparable institutions will depend upon you. The increasing number of succeeding elementary and secondary schools are not sufficient to provide instruction for all the children of the empire, and we are therefore planning to establish thousands more of such institutions. But the problem is to awaken the people to the need for such schools and to get capable instructors to teach the various subjects in the language of the people. We are grateful to God that today, through the training imparted by the various colleges and faculties of the university, the problem of teacher shortage is beginning to be solved. The molding of the young minds of future generations will depend upon these teachers, for theirs is a great responsibility. And we would like to remind them that they should take to heart this obligation and act accordingly. Education is a means of sharpening the mind of man both spiritually and intellectually. It is a two-edged sword that can be used either for the progress of mankind or for its destruction. That is why it has been our constant desire and endeavor to develop our education for the benefit of mankind. A qualified man with vision, unmoved by daily selfish interests, will be led to right decisions by his conscience. In general, a man who knows from whence he comes and where he is going will cooperate with his fellow human beings. He will not be satisfied with merely doing his ordinary duties but will inspire others by his good example. You are being watched by the nation and you should realize that you will satisfy it if you do good, but if, on the contrary, you do evil, it will hose its hope and its confidence in you. Though life is short, one should live and act in such a way that his achievements will bring him and his country a good name forever. If he does not use his training for worthy ends, he will be an enemy to himself and an obstacle to others. He will, indeed, be sick while supposedly healthy and dead while still alive. Simply watching other people's achievements is a characteristic of the lazy man. But it is to be hoped that our students, properly valuing great achievements, many of which are the result of education, will not be satisfied to be mere onlookers, admiring the work of other men, but doers actively participating in the development of their country. Records of the past reveal the great achievements of our forefathers. It is up to us to try to emulate them, for they will be standing in judgment of us. We have many natural resources and fertile lands which await our skill so that they may be developed to bring prosperity to the country. The qualified technicians are already beginning to develop the country. Is this not a blessing brought to us by education? It is only when man becomes master of his fate, able to determine his destiny, that he can be free from fears and inferiority. Such an individual or a nation stands respected by all. For us Africans, the conference of the heads of states held in May last, is an adequate proof that we are determined to be masters of our fate, owners of our wealth, and capable of removing the adjective dark from the name of our continent. Education, that of the nation and of the individual, is the bastion of this goal, and it's this realization that has in the past induced us to offer scholarships for our fellow Africans to study in Ethiopia. It was while we were yet the crown prince, energized by the love for education which our father instilled in us, that we vigorously pursued the path of education for our land. We have, ever since, perseveringly and increasingly followed that path, and we are now more than ever before convinced that it is education that heals Africa. It is this conviction that has so recently caused us to establish with our own personal funds a trust to assist Africans on the road to higher learning. The aim of the trust is to enable Ethiopians and other Africans of excellence to proceed further in their fields of pursuit. And you, who are graduating today, because you have received better opportunities than your fellow countrymen through a university education, have a new door open to you to struggle for that degree of excellence in the service of your country and humanity. We are deeply indebted to the lecturers and professors who have labored unceasingly to make this occasion possible, and we exhort them to work evermore in the training of young and competent men for the service of their country. And for you who are graduating today, may the Almighty make your future clear and challenging. July 2, 1963. Hymn Haile Selassie I. Speech to University of West Indies. Vice Chairman and distinguished guests. I feel deeply honored this afternoon for the fact that the University of the West Indies has conferred upon me the degree of Doctor of Laws. The history of the Ethiopian people is long, and in this history, which became Christian the earliest, the early education of Ethiopians was based on Christian teachings and the Bible. Although the university and the responsibility of the educators in the centuries past was slightly different from what we have at present, nevertheless the Christian Ethiopians have carried forward the idea of unity of our people. Our Christian forefathers have brought education and have expanded it in our country. These have become the basis and the explanation in part for the maintenance of independence by the Ethiopian people so many thousands of years. At that time universities of their own nature and professors did exist, thus the learnings that were started in churches, learnings that were always dedicated upon the idea of God, spread in Ethiopia, and this has helped to make Ethiopia free. Although we are now quite proud of our Christian heritage, we must also stress that Ethiopia is the modern state. That in Ethiopia there is religious tolerance. Religious tolerance has been practiced in Ethiopia for decades. This is precisely why the unity of our people has become time-tested. This is partly why the Ethiopian people have defended themselves against foreign aggression. But the times have changed, and even the purpose of education has altered. It has become necessary for the Ethiopian people to turn their attention toward the establishment of modern educational institutions. At first we were not able to do this without help. It has become necessary for me to send students for studies to foreign countries. Secondly, even before the invasion we had commenced the important task of establishing primary and secondary schools in numbers for the millions of Ethiopians. Our efforts in this direction, as is well known, have been interrupted by aggression against our peaceful people. Address on International Education Year. The United Nations General Assembly, it will be recalled, designated, in a resolution, 1970 as International Education Year. This decision was taken primarily in recognition of the urgent global need to formulate new educational systems and methods in educational administration and guidance. Member states of the United Nations organization are in the process of implementing this resolution in cooperation with UNESCO. In addition, UNESCO member states and other interested organizations are systems and administration. To increase budgetary allocations for universal education and to strengthen international cooperation in the field of education so that the goals outlined in the International Education Year can be realized. The acute problems related to education are manifested in the fact that today 2/3 of the population of the world are denied educational opportunities, while the present educational systems are being questioned and criticized. These immense educational problems cannot be solved overnight but need continued study and appraisal, and in this regard the United Nations organization deserves credit for focusing world attention on educational problems. Despite the enormity of the problems, the ever-increasing quest for education is a trend which we all welcome. In particular, the developing countries, such as Ethiopia, have and are continuing to give priority to education and educational facilities and to allocate a high proportion of their revenue to education in order to speed up the development process. To cite a specific example in this connection, worldwide study on student population shows a marked increase in the number of African students, particularly in the secondary and higher learning institutions. A result which should be a source of pride. In Africa, too, there is close cooperation and collaboration in the field of education. These results cannot be considered as final, rather they should be taken as stepping stones and as a driving force to improve and strengthen educational systems and administration. National UNESCO Commission. It will be recalled that we ordered the establishment of the National Educational Commission of Ethiopia in June, 1968, long before the UN resolution on the International Educational Year was passed. The directives of the Commission were to formulate and define the objectives of education in Ethiopia, methods to expand education and educational facilities in the country to speed up the development process and the integration of education in social life. The spirit of these directives is similar to those of the UN resolution on education. In addition, a special commission has been set up to coordinate the implementation so this important resolution on International Education Year. The Special Commission and the Office of the National UNESCO Commission will conduct appropriate programs such as public discussion on education and related subjects. And special stamps will be issued marking the International Education Year as well as following closely what is being done in other countries in this connection. While speaking today about the spirit and aspiration of the International Education Year, it is appropriate to mention here the annual International Literacy Day, which was observed, for the 4th time, on September 8, 1970 throughout the world. In 1967, the government of Iran founded the Mohammad Reza Pahlavi Prize, given through UNESCO, to honor and encourage countries, individuals and organizations which had significantly contributed in the campaign to eliminate illiteracy. We have spoken on the merits of that prize, the inspiring example of which has been followed by the government of the Soviet Union in its Nadezhda Krupskaya Prize, also given through UNESCO, for which it deserves credit. In 1967, 1968, and 1970, organizations in Ethiopia were awarded medals and certificates, and one honorable mention from the Pahlavi Foundation for their effective campaigns against illiteracy. The adult literacy campaign launched in Ethiopia under the supervision of the Ministry of Education and Fine Arts and through the collaboration and assistance of government and private organization is conducting satisfactory educational programs. The results achieved from year to year and particularly in the last year have been encouraging and augur well for the future. We have always encouraged and impressed upon our people the importance of education, and today, while speaking on the International Education Year and on the International Literacy Day which was observed on September 8, we wish to reiterate our conviction that education is a collective responsibility affecting every Ethiopian family. The objectives of the International Education Year are to modernize and improve educational systems and administration for the need of the times, to produce the necessary manpower for national development and to formulate new educational means and ways to strengthen international cooperation and to safeguard mankind. On this occasion, we urge our people to strive collectively to achieve these objectives through the expansion of education and educational facilities. October 9, 1970. At Asmara University. Life is full of trials and tribulations, and man in his struggle to survive and guide his own destiny has to be prepared to meet its many challenges, particularly in our modern world. Education can harness man's immense potential and enable him to be better equipped in his lifelong pursuit so he can utilize his strength and intellect to the highest use. Mankind has benefited from this through the ages. Much as a man has progressed in the scientific and technological fields, he has not made a parallel endeavor to enrich himself spiritually. The materialism of today is overriding the spiritual values to the extent that today we observe a lot of unrest and social upheavals which have become common phenomena the world over. Unless humanity reverts to the time-honored values which have enabled past generations to overcome with courage the adversities they had encountered in their daily lives, we shall not only be failing ourselves but posterity as well. In order to advance in our respective undertakings and set ourselves on the right path, we have to learn and draw abundantly from the great spiritual heritage which our fathers and forefathers have bequeathed to us. This can give us strength and a sense of continuity which are essential for progress and development. Learning and profound knowledge nurture noble character and impart wisdom. The family unit and educational establishments have great responsibilities in these endeavors, for they are the basis of national progress and prosperity. The harvest of life is character which grows with time, and it is this very factor that determines one's destiny and future. We shall always bear this in mind, and in so doing, we shall avoid personal disaster and will not bring adverse influence on others. It is our expressed hope that the education which you have acquired here will enable you, the graduating class, to face with determination the challenges that you are to encounter in your future assignments, so that you will be a positive contribution to the growth and development of your country. You should be well aware of the fact that it is not mere academic achievement that is expected of you. Your knowledge and training, unless put to proper and practical use, will be wasted like hoarded money, and you will be no better in this regard than the uneducated. Higher education which you have been fortunate to pursue entails heavy responsibilities and obligations. As the measure of your growth in your respective lines of studies remains to be revealed in your future careers, you should now be prepared to render dedicated services commensurate with the education you have had here. Throughout your life your competence will be gauged by the tasks you are to accomplish, and you shall be rewarded accordingly. It is, therefore, your primary duty to work hard in order to make sure that the result of your labors are worthy of the efforts spent on your education. People who have had the good opportunity of the education you have had should always adopt a rational and far-sighted approach to problems which they may face in the course of their careers, and should likewise endeavor to find lasting solutions for them which are adaptable and applicable to local conditions. In the future you have to serve your beloved country with sincerity and revealing faithfulness in accordance with the golden rule, love thy neighbor as thyself. For it is only then that you can be useful to yourselves and of service to your fellow countrymen. There is nothing more worthwhile and rewarding in life than to work for the benefit of others. One can derive more pleasure from giving than from receiving. We believe that each and every one of you who in leaving this institution for his or her respective calling has come to realize that education is seldom prized merely on account of its usefulness to individuals. Nor is it intended to be a mere ornament and a mark of distinction and prominence to the persons who are fortunate to receive it. Those who have had the opportunity to learn should always be at the disposal of those who have not had its benefit. Therefore, it is not only the individual but the community at large which should benefit from the virtues of education. The words of the Holy Bible, "Give and it shall be given unto you," are worth observing in your daily lives. This momentous event should be a time in which you should reflect and pose to yourselves the questions: what kind of service are we going to render to our country and what do we intend to accomplish in life? It is our firm belief that if you forego self-love and self-indulgence and break away from worldly desires, and you will be able to make great contributions to your family, community, and country. It is not long since the university was established. However, within this short span of time it has been able to develop and expand its facilities and services with admiration. These have been made possible because of the tenacity and dedication of the president and staff of this university. We deeply appreciate their endeavors and also wish to thank the government and people of Italy for their continued generous grants and contributions which have definitely helped the growth and progress of this university. We are also aware that His Holiness Pope Paul VI has been providing assistance to this university. May the Almighty bless and guide the members of the graduating class of this year and crown their future with success. On International Literacy Day. Today marks International Literacy Day, which is being observed for the 5th time through the aegis of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. We have explained in the past its aims and objectives. We take this opportune time to stress anew the importance of education and to urge those engaged in the field to strive harder still and those who have to learn to redouble their efforts. Education is the key to success for every citizen, who is expected to serve his country with the dictates of the time. This service will be more fruitful if it is backed by education. We can cite as an example here the role of science and technology in agriculture, for through better seeds and fertilizers harvests have been greatly improved and increased. As we have always noted in the past, education is the key to the success and development of our people, and we urge all to strive for higher education. On its part, our government has never ceased from encouraging or contributing its share. Mankind, be it in past, present or future, has always been judged not by color, or creed, but by the wealth of its knowledge. It is only through learning and knowledge that one can give valuable service of benefit to a country, and it is with this in mind that we have always urged and encouraged the young and the adult to learn. In this connection, the Adult Education Program, launched through the cooperation of government and private agencies, has achieved much since its inceptions. Taking into consideration the time required to introduce and publicize the program, we are aware that more than 1 million persons have learned to read and write, throwing off the bonds of illiteracy. This is indeed a great blessing and an example for others to follow by not wasting their spare time idly. At this juncture we would like to recall what we said a few years ago, namely, never despair of learning lest knowledge bypass you. True education is not only beneficial to individuals but also to one's country. True education goes hand in hand with one's culture and heritage and strengthens one's belief in God Almighty. The young and the adult will not be a burden to their country, if they strive for education, and that is why all should eagerly seek learning. Educational programs follow the dictates of the times. Academic education is not enough, it should be augmented by other practical learning taking into consideration the needs of everyday life. This additional learning can be acquired through books and magazines, or it can be incorporated into educational curricula. The vocational-oriented training programs launched in Kilalo, Arussi Governorate, and in Wulano, Sidamo Governorate, have given encouraging results. Plans are underway to launch similar programs in other governorates which should be prepared to emulate them. This adult literacy program being carried out by the National Literacy Campaign Organization with the help of individuals, private, and government agencies deserves the support of all. It is through such a program that the fight against ignorance can be intensified and the consequences stemming from ignorance such as injustice and humiliation could be stamped out, thereby ensuring national development, the welfare of individuals as well as peace and prosperity among nations. As we have said in the past, the fight against ignorance calls for global efforts. Ethiopia, which is aware of the problems, will fully participate in these worldwide efforts, and that is why this country is showing commendable results from year to year in the fight against illiteracy. For this effort to show still better results, it is imperative that those who have had the privilege of formal education teach their less fortunate brothers and sisters. This must be done now lest one fall behind the times and regret the consequences later. This is the age of competition, irrespective of the fields of activities, and calls for dedication. Everyone, regardless of his age, should strive to learn. It would be inconceivable for a person to appreciate the meaning of life and living itself without education. It would even be impossible for a person to utilize his God-given gifts. We thank all those who have taken part in the National Literacy Campaign programs as well as those who have benefited from these programs, and we commend the former. For what they did was in accord with their national obligation. We would also like to thank on this day UNESCO, the various private and governmental agencies, individuals, and association for their efforts and financial contributions in the fight against illiteracy. Our appreciations also go to the Shah of Iran and the government of the Soviet Union for providing moral and financial support to the worldwide campaign against illiteracy, providing international prizes annually through UNESCO to outstanding national literacy efforts. We urge Boy Scouts and children in Ethiopia to take an active part in this noble effort of teaching others as of the present academic year. We also urge officials in the various governorates to impress upon the people the importance of the literacy campaign in accordance with the directives issued in the past by our Minister of Interior. We pray to the Almighty to bless our efforts. September 10, 1971. To the League of Nations, Haile Selassie, June 1936. I, Haile Selassie I, Emperor of Ethiopia, am here today to claim that justice which is due to my people, and the assistance promised to it 8 months ago. When 50 nations asserted that aggression had been committed in violation of international treaties. There is no precedent for a head of state himself speaking in this assembly. But there is also no precedent for a people being victim of such injustice and being at present threatened by abandonment to its aggressor. Also, there has never before been an example of any government proceeding to the systematic extermination of a nation by barbarous means. In violation of the most solemn promises made by the nations of the earth that there should not be used against innocent human beings the terrible poison of harmful gases. It is to defend a people struggling for its age-old independence that the head of the Ethiopian Empire has come to Geneva to fulfill this supreme duty, after having himself fought at the head of his armies. I pray to Almighty God that he may spare nations the terrible sufferings that have just been inflicted on my people, and of which the chiefs who accompany me here have been the horrified witnesses. It is my duty to inform the governments assembled in Geneva, responsible as they are for the lives of millions of men, women, and children, of the deadly peril which threatens them. By describing to them the fate which has been suffered by Ethiopia. It is not only upon warriors that the Italian government has made war. It has above all attacked populations far removed from hostilities, in order to terrorize and exterminate them. At the beginning, towards the end of 1935, Italian aircraft hurled upon my armies bombs of tear gas. Their effects were but slight. The soldiers learned to scatter, waiting until the wind had rapidly dispersed the poisonous gases. The Italian aircraft then resorted to mustard gas. Barrels of liquid were hurled upon armed groups. But this means also was not effective. The liquid affected only a few soldiers, and barrels upon the ground were themselves a warning to troops and to the population of the danger. It was at the time when the operations for the encircling of Mokal were taking place that the Italian command, fearing a rout, followed the procedure which it is now my duty to denounce to the world. Special sprayers were installed on board aircraft so that they could vaporize, over vast areas of territory, a fine, death-dealing rain. Groups of 9, 15, 18 aircraft followed one another so that the fog issuing from them formed a continuous sheet. It was thus that, as from the end of January, 1936, soldiers, women, children, cattle, rivers, lakes and pastures were drenched continually with this deadly rain. In order to kill off systematically all living creatures, in order to more surely to poison waters and pastures, the Italian command made its aircraft pass over and over again. That was its chief method of warfare. Ravage and terror. The very refinement of barbarism consisted in carrying ravage and terror into the most densely populated parts of the territory, the points farthest removed from the scene of hostilities. The object was to scatter fear and death over a great part of the Ethiopian territory. These fearful tactics succeeded. Men and animals succumbed. The deadly rain that fell from the aircraft made all those whom it touched fly shrieking with pain. All those who drank the poisoned water or ate the infected food also succumbed in dreadful suffering. In tens of thousands, the victims of the Italian mustard gas fell. It is in order to denounce to the civilized world the tortures inflicted upon the Ethiopian people that I resolved to come to Geneva. None other than myself and my brave companions in arms could bring the League of Nations the undeniable proof. The appeals of my delegates addressed to the League of Nations had remained without any answer. My delegates had not been witnesses. That is why I decided to come myself to bear witness against the crime perpetrated against my people and give Europe a warning of the doom that awaits it, if it should bow before the accomplished fact. Is it necessary to remind the Assembly of the various stages of the Ethiopian drama? For 20 years past, either as heir apparent, regent of the empire, or as emperor, I have never ceased to use all my efforts to bring my country the benefits of civilization, and in particular to establish relations of good neighborliness with adjacent powers. In particular, I succeeded in concluding with Italy the Treaty of Friendship of 1928, which absolutely prohibited the resort, under any pretext whatsoever, to force of arms, substituting for force and pressure the conciliation and arbitration on which civilized nations have based international order. Country more united. In its report of October 5, 193, the Committee of 13 recognized my effort and the results that I had achieved. The governments thought that the entry of Ethiopia into the League, whilst giving that country a new guarantee for the maintenance of her territorial integrity and independence, would help her to reach a higher level of civilization. It does not seem that in Ethiopia today there is more disorder and insecurity than in 1923. On the contrary, the country is more united and the central power is better obeyed. I should have procured still greater results for my people if obstacles of every kind had not been put in the way by the Italian government, the government which stirred up revolt and armed the rebels. Indeed, the Rome government, as it has today openly proclaimed, has never ceased to prepare for the conquest of Ethiopia. The treaties of friendship it signed with me were not sincere, their only object was to hide its real intention from me. The Italian government asserts that for 14 years it has been preparing for its present conquest. It therefore recognizes today that when it supported the admission of Ethiopia to the League of Nations in 1923, when it concluded the Treaty of Friendship in 1928, when it signed the Pact of Paris outlawing war, it was deceiving the whole world. The Ethiopian government was, in these solemn treaties, given additional guarantees of security which would enable it to achieve further progress along the specific path of reform on which it had set its feet, and to which it was devoting all its strength and all its heart. Wal pretext. The Wal incident, in December, 1934, came as a thunderbolt to me. The Italian provocation was obvious and I did not hesitate to appeal to the League of Nations. I invoked the provisions of the Treaty of 1928, the principles of the Covenant. I urged the procedure of conciliation and arbitration. Unhappily for Ethiopia, this was the time when a certain government considered that the European situation made it imperative at all costs to obtain the friendship of Italy. The price paid was the abandonment of Ethiopian independence to the greed of the Italian government. This secret agreement, contrary to the obligations of the Covenant, has exerted a great influence over the course of events. Ethiopia and the whole world have suffered and are still suffering today its disastrous consequences. This first violation of the Covenant was followed by many others. Feeling itself encouraged in its policy against Ethiopia, the Rome government feverishly made war preparations, thinking that the concerted pressure which was beginning to be exerted on the Ethiopian government might perhaps not overcome the resistance of my people to Italian domination. The time had to come, thus all sorts of difficulties were placed in the way with a view to breaking up the procedure of conciliation and arbitration. All kinds of obstacles were placed in the way of that procedure. Governments tried to prevent the Ethiopian government from finding arbitrators amongst their nationals. When once the arbitral tribunal was set up, pressure was exercised so that an award favorable to Italy should be given. All this was in vain. The arbitrators, two of whom were Italian officials, were forced to recognize unanimously that in the Wal incident, as in the subsequent incidents, no international responsibility was to be attributed to Ethiopia. Peace efforts. Following on this award, the Ethiopian government sincerely thought that an era of friendly relations might be opened with Italy. I loyally offered my hand to the Roman government. The Assembly was informed by the report of the Committee of 13, dated October 5, 1935, of the details of the events which occurred after the month of December, 1934, and up to October 3, 1935. It will be sufficient if I quote a few of the conclusions of that report. Nos. 24, 25, and 26. The Italian memorandum, containing the complaints made by Italy, was laid on the council table on September 4, 1935, whereas Ethiopia's first appeal to the council had been made on December 14, 1934. In the interval between these two dates, the Italian government opposed the consideration of the question by the council on the ground that the only appropriate procedure was that provided for in the Italo-Ethiopian Treaty of 1928. Throughout the whole of that period, moreover, the dispatch of Italian troops to East Africa was proceeding. These shipments of troops were represented to the council by the Italian government as necessary for the defense of its colonies menaced by Ethiopia's preparations. Ethiopia, on the contrary, drew attention to the official pronouncements made in Italy which, in its opinion, left no doubt as to the hostile intentions of the Italian government. From the outset of the dispute, the Ethiopian government has sought a settlement by peaceful means. It has appealed to the procedures of the covenant. The Italian government, desiring to keep strictly to the procedures of the Italo-Ethiopian Treaty of 1928, the Ethiopian government assented. It invariably stated that it would faithfully carry out the arbitral award even if the decision went against it. It agreed that the question of the ownership of Wal should not be dealt with by the arbitrators, because the Italian government would not agree to such a course. It asked the council to dispatch neutral observers and offered to lend itself to any inquiries upon which the council might decide. Once the Wal dispute had been settled by arbitration, however, the Italian government submitted its detailed memorandum to the council in support of its claim to liberty of action. It asserted that a case like that of Ethiopia cannot be settled by the means provided by the covenant. It stated that, since this question affects vital interest and is of primary importance to Italian security and civilization, it would be failing in its most elementary duty. Did it not cease once and for all to place any confidence in Ethiopia, reserving full liberty to adopt any measures that may become necessary to ensure the safety of its colonies and to safeguard its own interests? Covenant violated. Those are the terms of the report of the Committee of 13. The Council and the Assembly unanimously adopted the conclusion that the Italian government had violated the covenant and was in a state of aggression. I did not hesitate to declare that I did not wish for war, that it was imposed upon me, and I should struggle solely for the independence and integrity of my people. And that in that struggle I was the defender of the cause of all small states exposed to the greed of a powerful neighbor. In October, 1935. The 52 nations who are listening to me today gave me an assurance that the aggressor would not triumph, that the resources of the covenant would be employed in order to ensure the reign of right and the failure of violence. I ask the 52 nations not to forget today the policy upon which they embarked 8 months ago, and on faith of which I directed the resistance of my people against the aggressor whom they had denounced to the world. Despite the inferiority of my weapons, the complete lack of aircraft, artillery, munitions, hospital services, my confidence in the League was absolute. I thought it to be impossible that 52 nations, including the most powerful in the world, should be successfully opposed by a single aggressor. Counting on the faith due to treaties, I had made no preparation for war, and that is the case with certain small countries in Europe. When the danger became more urgent, being aware of my responsibilities towards my people, during the first 6 months of 1935 I tried to acquire armaments. Many governments proclaimed an embargo to prevent my doing so, whereas the Italian government through the Suez Canal, was given all facilities for transporting without cessation and without protest, troops, arms, and munitions. Forced to mobilize. On October 3, 1935, the Italian troops invaded my territory. A few hours later only I decreed general mobilization. In my desire to maintain peace I had, following the example of a great country in Europe on the eve of the Great War, caused my troops to withdraw 30 kilometers so as to remove any pretext of provocation. War then took place in the atrocious conditions which I have laid before the Assembly. In that unequal struggle between a government commanding more than 42 million inhabitants, having at its disposal financial, industrial and technical means which enabled it to create unlimited quantities of the most death-dealing weapons. And, on the other hand, a small people of 12 million inhabitants, without arms, without resources, having on its side only the justice of its own cause and the promise of the League of Nations. What real assistance was given to Ethiopia by the 52 nations who had declared the Rome government guilty of a breach of the covenant and had undertaken to prevent the triumph of the aggressor? As each of the states members, as it was its duty to do in virtue of its signature appended to Article 15 of the covenant, considered the aggressor as having committed an act of war personally directed against itself? I had placed all my hopes in the execution of these undertakings. My confidence had been confirmed by the repeated declarations made in the Council to the effect that aggression must not be rewarded, and that force would end by being compelled to bow before right. In December 1935, the Council made it quite clear that its feelings were in harmony with those of hundreds of millions of people who, in all parts of the world, had protested against the proposal to dismember Ethiopia. It was constantly repeated that there was not merely a conflict between the Italian government and the League of Nations, and that is why I personally refused all proposals to my personal advantage made to me by the Italian government. If only I would betray my people and the covenant of the League of Nations. I was defending the cause of all small peoples who are threatened with aggression. What of promises? What have become of the promises made to me as long ago as October 1935? I noted with grief, but without surprise, that three powers considered their undertakings under the covenant as absolutely of no value. Their connections with Italy impelled them to refuse to take any measures whatsoever in order to stop Italian aggression. On the contrary, it was a profound disappointment to me to learn the attitude of a certain government which, whilst ever protesting its scrupulous attachment to the covenant, has tirelessly used all its efforts to prevent its observance. As soon as any measure which was likely to be rapidly effective was proposed, various pretexts were devised in order to postpone even consideration of the measure. Did the secret agreements of January 1935 provide for this tireless obstruction? The Ethiopian government never expected other governments to shed their soldiers' blood to defend the covenant when their own immediately personal interests were not at stake. Ethiopian warriors asked only for means to defend themselves. On many occasions I have asked for financial assistance for the purchase of arms. That assistance has been constantly refused me. What, then, in practice, is the meaning of Article 16 of the Covenant and of collective security? The Ethiopian government's use of the railway from Djibouti to Addis Ababa was in practice a hazardous regards transport of arms intended for the Ethiopian forces. At the present moment this is the chief, if not the only means of supply of the Italian armies of occupation. The rules of neutrality should have prohibited transports intended for Italian forces. But there is not even neutrality, since Article 16 lays upon every state member of the League the duty not to remain a neutral but to come to the aid not of the aggressor but of the victim of aggression. Has the covenant been respected? Is it today being respected? Finally, a statement has just been made in their parliaments by the governments of certain powers, amongst them the most influential members of the League of Nations, that since the aggressor has succeeded in occupying a large part of Ethiopian territory, they propose not to continue the application of any economic and financial measures that may have been decided upon against the Italian government. These are the circumstances in which, at the request of the Argentine government, the Assembly of the League of Nations meets to consider the situation created by Italian aggression. I assert that the problem submitted to the Assembly today is a much wider one. It is not merely a question of the settlement of Italian aggression. League threatened. It is collective security, it is the very existence of the League of Nations. It is the confidence that each state is to place in international treaties. It is the value of promises made to small states that their integrity and their independence shall be respected and ensured. It is the principle of the equality of states on the one hand, or otherwise the obligation laid upon small powers to accept the bonds of vassalship. In a word, it is international morality that is at stake. Have the signatures appended to a treaty value only insofar as the signatory powers have a personal, direct, and immediate interest involved? No subtlety can change the problem or shift the grounds of the discussion. It is in all sincerity that I submit these considerations to the Assembly. At a time when my people are threatened with extermination, when the support of the League may ward off the final blow, may I be allowed to speak with complete frankness, without reticence. In all directness such as is demanded by the rule of equality as between all states members of the League. Apart from the kingdom of the Lord there is not on this earth any nation that is superior to any other. Should it happen that a strong government finds it may with impunity destroy a weak people, then the hour strikes for that weak people to appeal to the League of Nations to give its judgment in all freedom. God and history will remember your judgment. Assistance refused. I have heard it asserted that the inadequate sanctions already applied have not achieved their object. At no time, and under no circumstances could sanctions that were intentionally inadequate, intentionally badly applied, stop an aggressor. This is not a case of the impossibility of stopping an aggressor but of the refusal to stop an aggressor. When Ethiopia requested and requests that she should be given financial assistance, was that a measure which it was impossible to apply, whereas financial assistance of the League has been granted, even in times of peace, to two countries, and exactly to two countries who have refused to apply sanctions against the aggressor? Faced by numerous violations by the Italian government of all international treaties that prohibit resort to arms, and the use of barbarous methods of warfare, it is my painful duty to note that the initiative has today been taken with a view to raising sanctions. Does this initiative not mean in practice the abandonment of Ethiopia to the aggressor? On the very eve of the day when I was about to attempt a supreme effort in the defense of my people before this assembly, does not this initiative deprive Ethiopia of one of her last chances to succeed in obtaining the support and guarantee of states members? Is that the guidance the League of Nations and each of the states members are entitled to expect from the great powers when they assert their right and their duty to guide the action of the League? Placed by the aggressor face to face with the accomplished fact, are states going to set up the terrible precedent of bowing before force? Your assembly will doubtless have laid before it proposals for the reform of the covenant and for rendering more effective the guarantee of collective security. Is it the covenant that needs reform? What undertakings can have any value if the will to keep them is lacking? It is international morality which is at stake and not the articles of the covenant. On behalf of the Ethiopian people, a member of the League of Nations, I request the Assembly to take all measures proper to ensure respect for the covenant. I renew my protest against the violations of treaties of which the Ethiopian people has been the victim. I declare in the face of the whole world that the Emperor, the government, and the people of Ethiopia will not bow before force. That they maintain their claims that they will use all means in their power to ensure the triumph of right and the respect of the covenant. I ask the 52 nations, who have given the Ethiopian people a promise to help them in their resistance to the aggressor, what are they willing to do for Ethiopia? And the great powers who have promised the guarantee of collective security to small states on whom weighs the threat that they may one day suffer the fate of Ethiopia, I ask, what measures do you intend to take? Representatives of the world, I have come to Geneva to discharge in your midst the most painful of the duties of the head of a state. What reply shall I have to take back to my people? June, 1936. Geneva, Switzerland. Public health. We have devoted particular attention to the material and physical well-being of our people through a program for public health. Today, we are opening and dedicating to the memory of our regretted and well-beloved daughter, the Princess Sahai Memorial Hospital, which will not only provide for the treatment of mothers and children but will, also, constitute the first center of medical instruction and training in Ethiopia. November 3, 1951. The raising of our country's standards of public health occupies an important and prominent place in the plans we have prepared for the peaceful growth and development of our nation. To improve conditions of life is by itself to benefit present and future generations, and however high the cost, This work must be accomplished. Agreements have been executed with the International Cooperation Administration for the furnishing of aid to assist our efforts in this direction. We long ago determined that, with the help of our people, no one in Ethiopia would lack adequate medical treatment because of his inability to pay for it, and a plan to implement the goal has already been prepared. November 9, 1957. Much has been achieved in the field of public health, which is of equal rank with education in assuring the welfare of our people, and much more is planned for the future. Discussions held with the government of the United States of America and the World Health Organization, a specialized agency of the United Nations, have resulted in the conclusion of an agreement whereby malaria-infested areas of our country, which today, despite their richness and fertility, remain uninhabited by man or beast, will be rid of this plague and will once more become available to our economy. Many of these areas, if freed from malaria, can be irrigated and thus make an immeasurable contribution to the growth of our economy. November 2, 1958. The increase in the number of our doctors has enabled us to open new clinics and to achieve advances in the execution of our public health program. The successful pursuit, during the past year, of the anti-malaria campaign stands as a tribute to the devotion and cooperation of experts from the Ethiopian government, the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and the United States Operations Mission to Ethiopia. We have also, to this end, established within the Ministry of Public Health an autonomous agency under the order for the particular purpose of the eradication of malaria. The past year has brought, also, a challenge to our energies and resourcefulness in meeting the severe conditions in Tigray, Eritrea, and the Ogaden, resulting from locust invasions and lack of rainfall. We, our government, and our people have contributed to relieve the suffering of our subjects in these regions. The United Nations Children's Fund has contributed powdered milk, the government of the United States of America, the Soviet Red Cross and Red Crescent, thousands of tons of cereals, and the people of Sweden, medicines and other medical aid. We, in this adversity, are deeply grateful for such exemplary manifestation of the brotherhood of man. It is hoped that greater and more efficient measures of control of the locust infestations in the Middle East may serve to remove a scourge which, from time to time has plagued our peoples. On our part, we have ordered the purchase of specially equipped planes for the combating of this destructive pestilence. November 3, 1959. Just as education assures the development and well-being of man, so must man's body be free from the scourge and ravages of illness and disease, and in the field of public health, praiseworthy advances have been made in the expansion of the public health facilities throughout our empire. Modern health centers have recently been established in a number of the larger towns, and several dozen clinics are being organized which will serve in smaller centers in the alleviation of disease. A modern and efficient provincial health administration is being established in implementation of the health tax promulgated by us and approved by our parliament to provide for the most efficient and effective administration of the revenue derived from this tax. Ethiopia is cooperating in the worldwide drive that is underway to eliminate malaria from the earth, and effective measures are being taken to this end following decisions reached at the World Health Organization's malaria conference held in Addis Ababa in November of last year. November 2, 1960. Efforts for the alleviation of suffering and disease are advancing satisfactorily. Endemic diseases which have sapped the strength and will of so many of our people for untold years are slowly yielding to the assaults mounted against them. And these efforts will continue unabated until they have achieved complete and permanent success. New clinics and hospitals have been opened, and today our nation disposes of more medical facilities than ever before in its history. November 21, 1963.